Hello, friends. Welcome. It's good to see everyone. I know we are trickling in, and I also know that we were a little. I was delayed in sharing some of the themes for this month, so they're coming up and gathering some of our teachers together. So a warm welcome to all. My name is Antoinette. If you haven't been with us before, a warm welcome to you. And if you have time and again, it's wonderful to see you. I always like to go into the gallery view on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom, you can go into the gallery, and it's just wonderful to see the faces trickling in and saying hello. Today's topic is on deepening dialogue, and each week we have been coming together to focus in on different practices that allow us to cultivate resilience, to build our own personal practice, and to really connect with one another. And that's really the most important part of Women Together. So what we like to do at the beginning is to just type into the chat. So whether you're on Zoom or YouTube, you can type directly in the chat and just give a little hello and share where you're coming from. It's always a great way for us to see who's in the room, but also what places we're in. And today I'm standing in Cortland Manor, New York, just right next to the Hudson River, just a few minutes away. And I really love this holding space that I get to play for this group, and the way that we have been deepening our connection to each other. We have this connect space. We also have a conversation space, which is conversations.womentogether.com. And that's been a place where some of us have been able to just find connections with each other over chat, and kind of a little social network for ourselves. Which is good now that Facebook went down and proved that it can do that. And then we also are starting tomorrow a circles program, which is going to be a bit more of a guided process, but it's also going to be more time in a small circle that you'll keep over the 6-week period. So you'll really get to deepen the connection with each other. So today we'll do a little activity around deepening dialogue, but over the 6 weeks of circles, you'll get a chance to really connect with each other. So just to say where we're coming from, we have the Hudson Valley is representing today, Boise, Philadelphia, San Rafael, California, West Nyack. Greetings from North Dakota, welcome. Arlington, Massachusetts, where it's wet. Yeah, it's here. It's been raining for the last couple days. Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, the Blue Ridge Mountains, North Carolina, Long Island, New York, rainy Philadelphia. Yep, West Palm Beach and New York. Wonderful. So we've got a lot of East Coasters today, a few West Coast, mostly US. We've been a group that gathers sometimes more internationally, sometimes mostly the US. So it just varies, but a warm welcome to all in all of your places. So what I'd like to do is offer just a first tiny practice, which is quite familiar probably to most, just to say that we've got Montgomery, Alabama, in the YouTube, New Hampshire, New York, Connecticut, and some Amish, Washington. So a warm welcome to all. I'm just going to grab my little, Toronto, here we go. So wonderful. We're going to do our first practice, and tiny practices are really just the ways that we come back to ourselves, come back to connection with each other. It's the sort of the moment where we can land and come back to the breath. And it's a tiny practice because it's something that you can take anywhere. You can do it anytime. You don't need to do a full month-long retreat, although those are wonderful, or week-long or day-long. You can just do it in a minute. So we're going to do a tiny practice today, now, and it's just going to be a moment of stillness. So we have a little singing bowl, and the singing bowl is something that I like to use to just mark with a sound the moment to mark any moment, but just to mark with a sound the moment of a shift. and maybe an invitation to tune in. So for me, I use this sound to reflect on it. And there's a wonderful teacher, Arthur Zients. I think I've talked about this a number of times, but he does a bell sound meditation. And it's just focusing on the sound of the bell. And then even after the sound of the bell is gone, focusing on the sound of the bell still in the mind. And just hearing the sound of the bell and staying with that, and allowing that staying with the sound of the bell to be a point of focus and a point of landing. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to get your feet nice and comfortable. Maybe they're on the ground, and just feel a rooted sense of connection to earth. If it's not through your feet, perhaps you're on a seat, and just feeling the connection of the body on the seat and the seat on the floor, and the floor somehow connected to the earth. And just feeling a sense of grounding. And as we feel that sense of grounding, also feeling a sense of uplift in the spine. Feeling both a connection to earth and a connection to sky. Just feeling the uplift in the back of the spine, the top of the head, and the space just above the head. And I'll ring the sound of the bell to start our moment of stillness, and I'll ring the sound one more time to bring us back together. So welcoming you back to the connection with the screen. I love the putting back on of the glasses that's happening across the room. I feel like you've seen me in my glasses and I'm wearing contacts today, but I have that feeling of like, just the relief of not having this little tiny bit of pressure and then putting it back. Okay, I'm here. I'm ready. So I felt that in the room. Wonderful. So welcome back. And I'd love to just hear what brought us here today. Perhaps it's, I come every week and that's okay, but really what brought you here to this conversation today? And today's topic is on deepening dialogue. So is there something about this topic or theme that you feel connected to or in need of in some way? So just checking in with yourself for a moment. What really brought you here today? So from Angela, a renewed commitment to get out in the world and connect. I love it. Kathleen, dialogue is basic to my practice and to what we need today. Absolutely, Carly. Curiosity and routine Glad you're here. Connie, this is my breath of fresh air. Doreen, the desire for quiet inside myself brought me here today. My weekly dose of serenity. Elizabeth just needed a break, waiting to see if the person I saw the other day has COVID, needed some peace as I wait. Well, we're sending you patience and hopefully lots of good health, Elizabeth. Kala, I've enjoyed coming regularly for weekly grounding hour, connecting one-on-one with some of the women met here offline. Beautiful. Would love to continue deepening the relationships made through this wonderful group. Great, Ruth Ann. I try to come every week, missed last week, and so missed it. We missed you. Grace Ann, studying BOEM dialogue practices in the community that exists here. Beautiful, Grace Ann. I'd love to hear more about what you've been exploring. He is definitely an inspiration around this area, particularly. Anne Marie, connect in community with women. I'm passionate about conscious conversation. Anne Marie, thank you. And I'll just check and see if we have anything coming in from the YouTube world. Beautiful. Okay, so we'll see if any. We have a few of us on YouTube, but let's see. Oh, the topics you present are always timely. A place a moment to connect with myself and others. Beautiful. So here we go, a couple more in Zoom. Feelings of being stuck, looking to feel more normal. I've been blessed to have a deep connection to one of our compadres. She keeps me honest. I would not have met her if not for this forum. It's not flowers. Thanks, Francis. So, it's an incredible experience to have this type of connection with you all and with this group, to be able to be in our own places, but to be connected. And I always feel like we are coming into a great hall together and sitting in circle. And I truly feel that when women sit in circle together and connect with one another, Eileen talks about the energy that happens in that. But I also feel that we really can address this current moment, and when I sit with women, I'm like, oh, that's what's really happening. We have this like sensing mechanism or something that comes online when we're together. So I really appreciate that about this group and how what Frances just said. She keeps me honest. So I appreciate that with all of us together. So today is on deepening dialogue, and I had a couple of points that I wanted to share about it, and then we'll move into breakouts and just practice it, because I think, and we'll also do a little meditation, but I think that experience of being able to deepen dialogue is really more about the practice of deepening dialogue. And I wonder, and feel free to post in the chat, why or what is it about deepening dialogue that feels important to you? And I'm just pulling up my little notes, but what is it that feels important to you about deepening dialogue? And some of you have, had a much, I ask this also because we have people in here who are passionate about conscious conversation and about, and doing work with BOEM's dialogue practices. So what is it about a deepened dialogue that feels really important, and why? And I think, I'm really personally, I'll just share some of my thoughts as you put yours together, that personally I was really touched by what Dorian shared last week. And I'm not sure how many of you were there, but she was talking about polarization. And she was talking about, so last week we did a practice of connection, and Dorian brought in a Presencing Institute practice, which is, typically we do it on a dialogue walk where we could go out in nature if possible and do some sort of movement together. But, theoretically, if possible, going out on a walk one-on-one and sharing with each other. And that really, invites us into a deeper level of connection. And I've found personally that when I'm having some sort of frustration or anxiety, that it just helps me so much to see the person and to connect, and not just connect about where are you from, what do you do, da da da, but to actually drop in to a place of real dialogue and connection, and um, it opens up a field of community, a field of understanding, and a field of connection. So For me, this, when we look, Dorian was talking about this moment that we're experiencing right now in the United States and around the world that feels polarizing. It feels, what Dorian talked about is that we're in a time of uncertainty, and that we kind of, in that moment of uncertainty when things are rocky and feel like we don't actually know if we're going to have solid footing, that we look for something that's going to make us feel safe. And often that means turning away, going somewhere else, going to our own community where we feel safe. And while that's incredibly important and needed, that we turn to our places where we feel safe, that we also turn back. And someone said earlier, I'm reconnecting with the world. And it's also important that we find those points of connection. So as Dorian was talking about practicing connection, but then also to take that step further and say we're deepening dialogue and really being with that. So what does that mean? And let me just pull up a couple from the chat. So much of life is only surface level, says Marilyn. Kathleen does insight dialogue and Japanese tea ceremony as a way to open to each other beyond differences in a place where it is possible to see and appreciate not only each person's unique beauty, but our fundamental connection. I love that, in part because I think so much, I feel when I meditate, I go to this place that's, it's here, it's, almost in further, but it's also bigger than me, bigger than this little body here on earth, bigger than my little human experience of going to the grocery store and making the food and doing the laundry and doing the things that are crucial parts of being human. But it connects me to this bigness of our fundamental interconnection, as Kathleen just said. Absolutely. So there's deepening an internal dialogue, a connection with ourselves, and then there's deepening dialogue with each other. So Diane shared less lonely during pandemic with the weekly connection. Anne Marie is a circle convener, and for her, the sacred space of community and circle provides a space for dialogue. It's all about being present with another, connecting our hearts, listening and witnessing one's authenticity and vulnerability. Francis says, it's like jumping into a pool for the first time. It's cool, but then it becomes more comfortable the longer you stay. I found that someone has to take that first step. Usually once you get through the tough part, there is the light recognition, the ability to feel for the other, not necessarily sameness, but empathy. And I absolutely love that, Francis, because we're not necessarily saying that we have to agree about everything, or that we've had the same life experiences, or that we experience life or the world in the same way. What we're saying is that we can be together with that. And that, going back to what Anne Marie said, it's about being present with another. So I have, there's a lot of really great work in the world about conversation and dialogue and how to do it and how to do it better. And it's all really good stuff. There's so much good stuff. But what I wanted to share, I talk a lot about a teacher who I've worked with over a long period of time, Otto Scharmer at the Presencing Institute. And the work that he and many others have done is looking at, I've talked about levels of listening, and alongside those levels of listening are also kind of almost 4 fields of conversation, 4 ways of conversing with each other. And the way that we think about it, so the first level of listening is downloading. And if you just think about it from that downloading perspective, it's just that, I hear what's happening and it goes into my brain. And then, I think of a school child, okay, I hear how to spell the word and then I put it out on the spelling test. It's downloading, right? And we're so familiar with this word because it's a technology term. We know we're downloading something from the cloud, from the internet, whatever. It's download, upload. It's, very simple. We know how to do it. And, often we download information. I just need to get this from the store, whatever it is. And the next level, so we do that in conversation too. We're sort of downloading, okay, this is what they're saying, and we can kind of regurgitate it back, or maybe we don't even, it just sort of goes in one ear, out the other. It's sort of and also I would say that this is that surface level conversation. How are you doing? Oh, I'm great. Good. Yeah, nice to see you. Good. It's here. You can almost hear it in the tone too. It's like I'm up here somewhere. And then we drop into a factual conversation. So that actually it can be more of a debate is how we talk about it in the Presencing Institute. So we go move from downloading into and the kind of factual experience into debate. So I have my opinion, you have your opinion, I'm standing here, you're standing there. Again, a different tone, but also a different stance that I'm in my opinion, I'm in my like I'm also in my head in both of these too, but I start to actually enter into my head. I'm like, oh, here I am with my opinion and my life experience, and this is what it is. And we start going back and forth. That's debate. And then we move into a kind of relational experience. So empathic dialogue or more reflective dialogue, where I start to actually step into someone else's shoes. And this is where we activate the heart. And some of us I know in this room are really good at this one, and almost we jump out of our own skin sometimes to do it for with other people, and we kind of jump into it, almost off the deep end. And at the same time, there are many of us who, that might be scary. That might be a little hard to activate the heart in conversation with someone else. And so we kind of want to stay in this, oh, I'm here and I'm doing my thing and this is my, debate level. But some of us, when we can open that little space in the heart and we can step into the other person's shoes and feel just for a few moments how they might be feeling, there's a whole new level of conversation, of dialogue that starts to open up. It's more reflective, it's more curious, it's more open. And the next level of dialogue is generative dialogue. And the idea in this is that the way that I think about this is if I'm standing here as Antoinette and I'm sharing, from my open heart and let's say Diane, I just happened to see your gallery view, but let's say Diane is sitting there across from me and she's, being Diane and I'm, stepping into her shoes and feeling a little bit of her experience in this. And then there's a moment where it's actually in between us. There's something that's actually beyond either of us. It wouldn't have existed if the two of us weren't sitting there. But it's not from Antoinette and it's not from Diane. It's living in between us. And so I think it was Kathleen who just shared about the circle. It's something that happens at the center of the circle. So when we're all sitting together and if you think about us being in circle together and looking at the center of the circle, where maybe there's a candle or a place setting, and just being with that center space, that's where the generative dialogue lives. It's in between us. And it may have been there before we sat down and it may be there afterwards, but it also, something begins when we actually attend to it. So there's something that actually starts when we just begin to look at it together. And it wouldn't have been there if we did it alone. So I bring in that generative dialogue space because it's sometimes when you're in it and you're in this beautiful conversation, or maybe, for those of you who make music or art or, any kind of creation experience, has this kind of moment where you're in flow. When you're singing that song or you're listening to the music and you hear, oh, wow, their heart is fully in this, or it's almost like the song is totally brand new this time that they're singing it. It's that experience of generative dialogue. And that can be a magical place, and it can, sometimes it lasts for a while. Sometimes it's like, oh, we had that moment and then we moved back into debate. That's okay. And sometimes, it's a practice. So practicing dropping into generative dialogue can be really difficult. We have to move through some of those levels. But also just noticing where we are, because sometimes it just happens. And you're with someone and it's just a kind of that experience. It's not necessarily something you try and force. But if we really open the mind, open the heart, and open this place of courage to just be vulnerable and be really who we are in that moment, then that magic is always possible. So that's my little, 4 levels of dialogue as shared by Presencing Institute. And I'm happy to also just share it in conversations. I'll try and find a little diagram of it for us. But there are a couple people who have referred to it as talking nice, talking tough, reflective dialogue, and then generative dialogue. And when we're in those first two, talking nice and talking tough, it can be useful at times, and you can think about, when is it useful for me? But it also can kind of keep us in the past. And when we're in the empathic and generative dialogue, it can invite us into something new. It can invite us into the future that we're trying to create together. So that's my invitation to us, is to practice these different levels. It's not perfect by any means, but it's always a practice. And what I'd like to invite us to do is to just go into a moment of stillness with this before we go into dialogue with each other. And just tune in to the different moments that you've been in each of these levels of conversation, and these kind of fields of conversation with others and with yourself. So my last tiny practice will just be, I hope that if you take some time to write and journal, you can also do that instead of doing this as a meditation practice. But we'll just, for those of you who want to take this moment to just meditate and reflect on this, we'll just do a little moment of reflection. So if you'd like to just get your feet on the ground, you can lower your gaze. And again, if you'd like to take this moment to journal, that's fine too. But maybe just lower your gaze or close your eyes and connecting inwards. And just recalling a time that you may have experienced that first level of the first field of conversation, the first level of dialogue, downloading. Maybe just getting a reminder of a time. Maybe you were polite or cautious. You were kind of maybe following the rules with each other. Or maybe you were even projecting on one another. So just kind of recalling a moment or an experience. Just noticing how you felt, what you sensed. Perhaps there was a feeling in the body. Then you can let that one go and just turning your attention to perhaps another memory, or maybe the conversation evolved. Someone said something where there was a clash, or there was a kind of difference in point of view, and you got into that kind of debate experience where you kind of felt, I am my point of view here, that my listening was really, while that person was talking, I'm thinking about the next thing that I'm going to say. Maybe we start to see some of the ways that we were being polite, and now we've just kind of disrupted that. We've opened it up a little bit. Just noticing how you felt in that. Perhaps it was really useful. It opened up some new information. Just being with what it feels like to be in that debate experience. And then a time where you moved into empathic or reflective dialogue, where you moved into curiosity and perhaps an open heart. You really stepped into someone else's shoes and really stayed open to what was possible between you. Perhaps a moment where you or someone else shared, I really felt heard. One of those comments where I really felt heard when we were talking about this. That's typically an indicator of that kind of conversation. Just noticing how you felt. Perhaps there's a sensation in the body. For me, my shoulders relax. Just noticing what comes up for you when you think about that empathic conversation. Then perhaps recalling a time in which you moved into generative dialogue, where you really, it's almost like time slowed down. You moved into a sense of flow. It's one of those conversations that you got into that you didn't even realize that 3 hours had passed or whatnot. And you really began to listen from a place of potential, a place of what was possible. And perhaps in that experience, the boundaries actually dissolved. And you really tuned into the space between and around whatever was happening. Just noticing the feeling in the body there. And also noticing if there's resistance to any of these. If there's I really like being in debate. That's a really great place for me. Or maybe a generative dialogue's hard. I don't like doing it. Whatever is coming up for you, just notice it. And when you're ready, if you'd like, you can just jot down a few notes. If you've been journaling this whole time, just take an extra moment. But if you can, grab a paper and pen and just jot down what's come up for you. Is it easier to be in one of these levels for you? Are you the person that comes in and disrupts the polite conversation all the time? Or are you the person that really, Francis is raising her hand. Or are you the person that really, just kind of holds the polite, these are the rules and I want to stay engaged with you, and so I'm just going to stay here. Or are you really able to drop into that generative space or an empathic space? You really love being in empathy, or empathic conversation. And what we'll do is we'll turn to each other and we'll just share with one another. And last time we opened up a conversation and we shared a little bit about, where we're from and turning point moment in our lives, or someone that really changed our life, and also kind of a little bit about our current situation. And today, I'd love to focus in on if there was either a turning point moment or person that you had a kind of generative experience with, or a generative dialogue experience with. And that may not have happened, and you may just want to share, like, I just like being in debate. That's fine. But just noticing where you are in this level of dialogue when you move into this room. But so the invitation here is to focus in on a turning point moment or person where you had a generative dialogue experience. So perhaps one potential experience could be a teacher who really saw you at your highest potential and invited you into that. They saw something that you didn't even know was there yet. Or perhaps a parent or a loved one who really, supported you and had your back, or, they really, and you sat down with them. Or maybe you're an artist and you co-create something. So those are all some of the general moments where we might find that. But just considering, where was a turning point moment, And I say turning point moment because often those kinds of generative experiences shift something for us. So it really creates, after that moment, something really changed in my life. And it could be really small, but maybe there's a big one that you want to share. Either way is okay. So that's the invitation. And again, remembering that we're in this moment of levels of dialogue, which means that if we want to move from the polite conversation into debate, we can name it now. We can say, I'm going to break the rules here a little bit and go into debate, or I'd like to really open up a space for empathic dialogue here, where maybe we can open our hearts more. So we can ask for that from each other, and we can ask for that from ourselves. And just noticing when we come back, noticing where are we, keeping that meta mind, keeping that big eye view to it. Where am I in this moment? Am I feeling really empathic here? Or am I feeling like I'm in debate mode? Just noticing when we go into this conversation with our group of 4. So again, remembering that we don't know what each other had for breakfast this morning, let alone the rest of our life experience. So enjoy your time together. We have about just over 20 minutes. I'll say 22 minutes to be together, and then we still have a few minutes to close at the end. So enjoy your time together, and we'll see you back here in 22 minutes. And for those of you on YouTube, I hope to see you in circles or in next week's Connect. We will be announcing topics and teachers who are coming, but please feel free to sign up, and we'll see you next week. For those of you in Zoom, see you in 22 minutes. Have fun.